In this video, I'll share the first of the two most common parenting pitfalls that I have seen parents step into very unintentionally in the last 23 years of working with young people and families as a clinical psychotherapist. I've accrued probably around 70,000 hours of working with young people and families, especially those in crisis. So I've been able to see and ultimately really help a lot of these families who have been so well-meaning to support their struggling young person and have just fallen into these traps. Okay, so here's the foundation of these pitfalls that I see in every family. Whenever families really struggle and there's a high amount of stress, what happens is that parents become unintentionally selfish. Now, why is that? And I'm not judging that. I'm very selfish when I'm under stress too, right? Why is that? It's because when we are at a high degree of stress, we do everything we can to meet our own needs first. This great example is ask someone how they're feeling when they stub their toe. They're going to be very angry. And why are you asking me, right? So that's a high amount of stress. That's a high amount of pain. And we're not necessarily aware of how deep our feelings are or where it comes from in those moments, right? So when we are doing our best to support our kids or our young people and we're under a lot of stress, we have often an innate lack of awareness about ourselves. And that is a perfect opportunity for our own unfinished business, our own past wounds, our unfulfilled needs from the past to come up. So here's the first pitfall. I call it rescuing. And what I mean by this is that when a parent saves a child from an emotional disturbance, okay, let's first define this and make some very important distinctions, because it's very important to distinguish rescuing, which I think is unhelpful ultimately, to intervening, which is essential, because an intervening means that we are saving our kid from an objective safety concern, right? Rescuing is where a parent feels like they have to intervene because of their own emotional disturbance, right? So let's make that distinction even more clear. Rescuing is feeling like a parent has to intervene because I, as a parent, am so emotionally uncomfortable. And our own emotional discomfort skews our lens of assessing what our child can handle or not handle, emotionally or in any other situation. Intervening means that we are clearly seeing that our child or your young person cannot successfully handle this situation, this relationship, whatever it is, and needs our advocacy in order for it to go well. So you can see here, this is a very important and fine distinction. And I would say also that there's not a right-wrong here. I am not a person who lives in the world of right and wrong, right? This is a gray area here that we're looking at. And I'm really starting this video to start the discussion, further discussion, and ultimately inspire you as a parent to look within around how you get emotionally uncomfortable or disturbed when your child is struggling. Because if you can deal with yourself and be okay or practice being okay, even when your child is struggling, it will absolutely help you define what is intervening and what is rescuing for yourself. And you, as another co-parent or other parts of your support group, will be able to help you in creating that distinction, right? Let's create more of a definition of intervening, okay? And here's some ideas around this definition. One, intervening means that the young person will experience significant harm if we don't intervene, that has the potential to have long-lasting effects that are longer than a year, is what I say, right? So let's use some examples. There is a conflict at school and you know that your child did nothing wrong, or maybe did some things that they could have done better, but the school, maybe because of politics, because of culture, because of different dynamics that are happening here. I've seen this happen a lot, actually, so that's why I'm using this as an example. If the parent wouldn't have stepped in and said, absolutely not, I am not okay with this injustice occurring for my child, your child might experience some long-lasting effects around being expelled or not being able to get into another school, whatever it may be. you may need to intervene. I would also say that falls under the category of legal conflicts or legal situations that you might need to intervene on behalf of your child in order for them to successfully navigate that. Otherwise, the effect could have a year or longer kind of effects, right? So that's one example, is intervening in, let's say, academic or legal situations. Secondly, a significant objective injustice will occur if you don't intervene, meaning the young person doesn't have the ability to successfully advocate for themselves. And if they experience the result of this injustice, again, it would have long-lasting emotional, logistical, tactical, academic, legal ramifications around your intervention, right? Here's the third category. So first they had significant harm that would have a long-lasting effect if you didn't intervene. 2, an objective and significant injustice would occur. Again, that would have long-lasting effects. And 3rd, their ability, the young person's ability to advocate for themselves is limited by their age, their role, or their current skill set. So meaning this example of a school or a legal situation where, okay, maybe they made a mistake, but the result or the consequence or the punishment is far beyond what you firmly believe and know in your bones should actually occur. That is a great time for you to intervene as a parent. And there are so many more examples that are very appropriate for you to intervene when there are actual injustices occurring in your child's life. I will never diminish the importance of you intervening in your child's life. The main distinction that is important to create for yourself, is this about you feeling better because you're so uncomfortable, or is this about your child? And if you can navigate how your own emotional discomfort through your own therapy, your own contemplation, looking at your own relationship with your parents in your childhood, and are you trying to resolve something? Meaning you see them so uncomfortable and you get so uncomfortable in yourself that you just have to do something and make them feel better because you feel not so great yourself, right? That is rescuing. That's the unintentionally selfish expression of us not having done our own work. And I've done it before, right? I've done a lot of work on myself, so I don't think I do that very often. I probably do here and there with people or with young people or with families. I'm sure it happens. It just happens a lot less because I've done a lot of my own transformational work, right? So all this to say, look at yourself, look for yourself around how you get emotionally uncomfortable when your young person is struggling, and then distinguish. Can they handle this? Most of the time, yes, right? Here's a really good example from my own life. I shared this in another video, so if you've seen that, this will be a little redundant, but it's a good story. So I was in 5th grade. It was the late 80s in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I was a pretty anxious kid, and my mom was an anxious mom. And I would say, hi mom, if you're watching this, we've talked about this. So she would err on the side of rescuing a lot because she would get very anxious and upset when I would get upset, right? One day, it was a Sunday, it was like fall of 88 or something like that, 1988, and I forgot a book at school. I was in elementary school, and I was freaking out because I was not going to get the assignment done. It was going to be late. I was going into this whole catastrophic situation that was going to occur if I didn't get the book or read whatever it was, and I begged my mom to go to the school on a Sunday and see if we could get in and get the book. So we drive up the block to my John F. Kennedy Elementary School there in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we start banging on all the doors and windows. Miraculously, there's a custodian in there, a janitor in there, who opens the door and is like, "Can I help you?" And my mom was an educator and a teacher in that school district, so I think she even knew the custodian or knew they had a mutual friend or something. Anyway, we got in and got the book. And I was so happy. And I was like, "Thank you, Mom." My mom was like, "Oh, you're welcome, sweetie." And it was all like a happy ending. But I have to tell you, it was not actually a happy ending because I left my childhood with a significant dearth of emotional resilience. On top of this, I left my childhood, adolescence, and went into young adulthood with a high degree of entitlement. Meaning, I expected the world to give me things if I was emotionally uncomfortable. Now, this showed up everywhere in my life in my 20s. At work, I expected to be given promotions and higher pay when I didn't really work for it, or that I was more exceptional than other people, that I was an exception compared to other people. This arrogance, I had this kind of arrogance and self-centeredness about myself. In relationships, romantic relationships, I really put myself first and expected them to kind of mold to me and my needs and my desires and what I wanted. Same in friendships. I chose a very selfish pursuit of rock climbing, which is starting to shift in its culture. I was a high-performance rock climber, and I just did things that were very selfish and kind of self-absorbed. And I also expected the world to mold to my needs. Why? Because not any time, but I would say a lot of the time, not even most of the time, but a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, when I got emotionally disrupted, I got rescued by my mother. Right? Now, if my mother in a perfect world had kind of like done her own work, and I mean, it was a different era too. I mean, no one did psychotherapy back in Green Bay, Wisconsin in the 90s and the 80s, it's a different generation. So I don't actually expect this of my parents. But I think that if she would have had done her own inner work diligently, she would have seen that moment. Let's take that Sunday night, 1988. As an opportunity for me to be resilient, right? She could have sat me down and said, listen, we can't get the book. There's nothing to be done. How are you going to navigate this? And I know, because I was a capable young person, however old you are in 5th grade or 4th grade, that it would have been fine. Maybe I would have gotten like a fail on that assignment. Would have that drastically affected my life in the next year of my life? Absolutely not. Because I was a pretty good student. I was a pretty good kid. I mean, I had my issues of anger and sadness and all this kind of stuff. There are other videos where I talk about my own childhood and how I had struggles there. But I would have been okay, right? And I would have learned something, especially with a certain context that my mom could have set up, right? She could have said, you're going to be okay. What can you do in the future to not have this happen? And I probably would have been like, it's not going to be okay. And I would have thrown a whole tantrum. And she'd probably just been like, okay, so you're having a hard time right now. I'd have been like, yeah, take me up to the school, man. Yeah, I wouldn't have said man. You get my point. I would have thrown a tantrum and it would have been fine. And she would have held the line that this was a growth opportunity for me. Not only could I do something in terms of planning and increase my executive functioning around being able to plan my life and prioritize tasks and pieces like that, but more importantly, emotionally, if she could have demonstrated what it was to be emotionally resilient for her in that moment, it would have trickled down and made that impact on me. So all this to say, let's summarize, okay? There's a clear distinction between intervening and rescuing. What we're talking about here is how when parents sometimes unintentionally, I want to make this really clear, absolutely unintentionally, it's not malicious. I have seen it, but so rarely seen parents do malicious things with their kids. So it's unintentional. It's from a lack of awareness. They intervene on their child's behalf because of a way that they feel that they haven't dealt with. And they feel like, again, unconsciously, if they make their child feel better, then they'll feel better. That's what I'm defining as rescuing, okay? Very important to intervene, work, and become more aware around how we rescue, because the result will be is that our kids will be less and less emotionally resilient. Okay. All right. Good luck with this. Leave a comment below. Give a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And I'll see you next time. Oh, for part 2. All my best.